Alrighty, brake work. This plate, what they call the brake piston, which is this guy right here, has two O-rings that seal it, one outside, one inside. And when you step on the brake pedal, hydraulic pressure goes behind here and pushes out on this disc right here. I got one I pulled out that I replaced because it was all gouged up on the inside there, which would tear out that O-ring. But anyway, junk. That then pushes on this plate, and then the first friction disc runs here. Well, there's these little screws right there and right there, and the idea behind them is, as the brakes wear, the screws push on one side of the housing and it turns the screw, and there's this little tab of metal right there to hold it in its set position. So as it wears, it sets up and holds the slop out of it. Well, this side had new brakes put in it, but when you'd step on the pedal, instead of just being brakes right now, it went right to the floor and then it would come back. Well, what happened is the return springs would return this all the way to the completely home position when it should have been held up. And that's because there's these little things here. There is a part number for them, but this is considered a non-serviceable assembly. So you can't buy just a spring, and I think the parts guy said that the whole assembly is like $700 or something. So what I found is this spring was broke off, and this one was just bent. So I straightened that one out with the pliers, but this side was broke off. And it's a little metal tab with a little piece of spring steel that is originally riveted onto it. Well, what I did is I took that old chainsaw right there and I pulled the recoil spring out of it carefully. And this is spring steel, which is very similar to what they used. I'm sure a coil spring out of an old lawnmower engine would probably work too. Just take your side snips, clip off about 3/4 of an inch. Then I ground the rivets out and pulled the old piece off, and I just took the MIG welder and just tacked it onto the tab over there. So now it clicks and holds that screw where it should. So now I gotta put that guy back on there, and then we'll slide the housing back on, and hopefully this brake will work like it should now. Alright, I got my light for a little better lighting in here, but I'm not gonna pull this out, but just for reference, I guess, there is two O-rings in here, and to get it out, you just loosen this bleeder here. Well, you can pump the brakes and push it out, otherwise you can loosen that bleeder, take a short piece of hose with an air gun and just blow it out with compressed air. And then it's easy to do the center O-ring. You just take a pick and pull it out, put the new one in, but when you do the outside O-ring, it'll seem like it's a little too small for the opening. It won't want to sit in its groove. It'll want to be pulled out in one spot. So what I have found is the easiest way to put it in is you just fill that O-ring groove with some grease. And that grease, then you carefully stick the O-ring into that grease, and then you can get the piston in. You might have to warm the O-ring up a little bit, stretch it out, whatever. Well, anyway, then the next guy that goes on is this little plate that I was just showing you a little bit ago with those little springs on it. And this guy goes over the old spline shaft like so, and right there is where the head of the screw sits. Okay, and then friction disc goes on, come on, like so, and there is two alignment dowel pins that are stuck in this housing. But I'll just show you what's in here. Then there's the intermediate disc, which goes like so. and then another friction disc, and then you're at the back of the housing. And you got your 4 return springs there and 2 dowel pins to help line everything up when you put her together. I think it's kind of easier to put pins in on this side. Alright, I got it all stacked together how it goes. I pulled the dowel pins out of the housing and stuck them into the casting on the rear end. One more thing, there is another O-ring behind the shim pack on here. There's your shims right there. And if you got oil leaking from back here, that's that O-ring. And it's the same bolts that hold this on that hold the whole brake assembly together. So once you have the brake off, you just take a pry bar, you can pop this guy out and change the O-ring behind there. And again, I'm not going to pull it out because I'm not changing it. But anywho, so now it's kind of a bear to try to wrestle that housing on there with these splines and try to get the splines lined up. But now everything's lined up and you just got to line up those 2 pins and get it back on. It's easy to tell which way is up on the housing because there's a whole little tab right here where there's a bolt that goes up to the floor. But yeah, it's a 2-hand job, so I'm going to shut the camera off and get that slid back on.